Some opening shot thoughts tonight on the kind of politician that doesn't seem to exist anymore. Former Republican Illinois Governor Jim Edgar, he died this weekend after a battle with pancreatic cancer. He led this state for 2 terms from 91 to 1999. Edgar was a genial, moderate, and dedicated public servant who believed in cutting deals across the aisle and practicing a kind of politics that brought people together.
He got along with the Democrats. He got along with Mike Madigan, who was the speaker at that time, Phil Rock, and they were tough guys to deal with. But he managed and he found ways to reach a conclusion on budget issues and also major policy issues.
And Edgar was an influence even after he served founding the Edgar Fellows program at the University of Illinois that trained and mentored young people who wanted to go into public service regardless of political persuasion. And you can tell how universally liked Edgar was when the condolences yesterday came across the aisle from all manner of Illinois elected officials, Democrat and Republican, even Governor Pritzker, who praised him as a mentor.
He was a Republican, but he understood that people in public service are trying to do what's best for the state of Illinois. And so I really I had a very dear fondness for him.
And Edgar's death hits hard given the political climate right now. One thing that Jim Durkin told me, he doesn't believe Edgar could ever get elected today. Preach compassion, moderation, reaching out to the other side, problem solving, and you lose out to the polarizing firebrand that says we're at war with our ideological opposites. And you know they're going to go on social media to perform their screed. Now, Edgar's style of politics is almost unrecognizable. His legacy runs deep in the land of Lincoln. If politicians want to put a stop to the country's dark political turn, they ought look no further than Jim Edgar, a humble, respected, pragmatic politician from downstate Illinois who served his state honorably. Tonight, former Illinois Tea Party firebrand turned never-Trumper Joe Walsh on his relationship with Charlie Kirk and the country's polarized climate. A new poll takes a temperature on Chicago's Latinos and finds they're not too fond of Trump or Mayor Johnson. And why Chicago Public Schools is losing students by the thousands. Welcome to Paris on Politics. You know, the nation has had a weekend now to digest the shocking murder of conservative activist and influencer Charlie Kirk as FBI and Utah law enforcement move toward an arraignment of 22-year-old suspect Tyler Robinson. Some public office holders have called for turning down the temperature. Governor Pritzker claims President Trump is doing the opposite.
This is a moment when Americans must come together and say clearly that threats and political violence are not the answer.
And joining you now is someone who knew Charlie Kirk going back to his high school days in the northwest suburbs, former Illinois Republican Congressman Joe Walsh. Joe, always great to talk to you. Tell me how you met Charlie Kirk and what your relationship was with him.
Oh gosh, Paris, it's good to be with you. I met him when he was 16 years old. It feels like 100 years ago. I was running for Congress back in 2009, 2010. He was still in high school, Wheeling High School. He worked on my campaign. He became, Paris, like a son to me, a political son. I became a political mentor to him. I helped him get TPUSA started. We were tied at the hip politically, and I would speak at all of his events. And then, you know, Trump came along and Charlie and I went our separate ways. He became a big Trumper. I became a big never Trumper. And Paris, you know, like so many other stories in this Trump era, Charlie and I became estranged and didn't speak for a few years. But boy, I'll tell you what, last week still felt like that I lost a son.
I'm sure it was gut-wrenching. You know, Joe, he was notable for his polite demeanor and love of debate, but also polarizing statements, comments that he would make on his podcast. Where did you two split apart, and why do you think that split happened?
He became MAGA, Paris. Look, we were both Tea Party. TPUSA, when it started, was focused on all the economic issues, debt and capitalism and free markets. But then Charlie, and remember how young he was at the time, he helped Trump in 2016. and he became part of Trump world. And the Tea Party turned into MAGA, and the Tea Party became all about these other cultural issues and the nationalism and the building the border and the going after transgenders and people of color. And like so many of my former Republican colleagues, they kind of put to the side a lot of their original beliefs because they wanted to be a part of Trump world. And I just couldn't.
And I know that that world has been lucrative for a lot of people. And we have to say that Charlie Kirk's organization was a giant, sprawling organization. It was very influential, but also lucrative. What do you know, President Trump, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, they've wasted no opportunity to blame this on the far left, saying this is an ideologically motivated crime. It's a different tack than Utah Governor Spencer Cox has taken, basically, you know, trying to turn down the political temperature. But what do you make of this rhetoric in the days since this terrible assassination?
It's horrible. It's the wrong tack. And again, if Charlie Kirk were alive and another really well-known MAGA influencer was assassinated, Paris, Charlie would be doing the same thing. He'd be declaring war on the left. This is what Trump and Vance are doing. Look, MAGA wants like a civil war. They want a holy war, a religious war. They don't want to bring people together. They don't want to unify this country. This is all about fomenting fear and hate because J.D. Vance and Donald Trump think that's their pathway to victory. I mean, this is horrible. The president should have stood in front of the country last week and said, everybody stand down. That's it. No political violence anywhere. It's always wrong. But Trump attacked half the country.
And we know with these incidents of political violence, assassinations, it has happened on both sides. We know about the Minnesota lawmakers. But then if we widen this to school shootings, mass shootings, it's certainly an issue that goes across the spectrum to extremism in general. What about Utah Governor Cox? It almost felt like he was stepping into that void. He had a national platform. He excoriated social media, called it evil. He said, turn it off, go touch grass. And it looks like social media is where this war is percolating, really.
He, in essence, Cox tried to become president last week. And I mean that in a positive sense. He assumed the role of president of the United States because, and he could never say this publicly, I will, Donald Trump is humanly incapable of delivering that message that the Utah governor delivered. Paris, I'm older than you, man, but every other president in our nation's history. I mean, this was a traumatic thing that happened to the entire country last week, and any other president would use that moment to bring this country together.
Certainly.
But I gotta say, that's not what Trump is. That's not what J.D. Vance is. And that's not what my former political party is all about. And again, I wish Charlie Kirk were here, right? Murder, political violence is always wrong. But Charlie would be preaching this same divisive message right now, and we've got to stop that.
And you know, the division is again, I observe this on social media. It's very lucrative. If social media is the platform that you build your brand or your image on, it is all about the division. But to play devil's advocate, Republicans have said, well, you know, the left has been using terms like Nazi, calling us Nazis. Republicans in Illinois claim that Governor Pritzker has called them Nazis. Pritzker kind of, in his public speaking, what he's done is sort of compare the current situation to what had happened before Nazi Germany and the fall of the democracy in Germany. But you know, so what they're saying is this rhetoric, this violent rhetoric, is fomenting this violence on the left. Is that fair?
No, look, everybody does that. And I think people probably throw around the word Nazi way too easily, again, on all sides. But look, we've got to get to a point, Paris, in this country where you can abhor the beliefs of Joe Walsh, but not want anyone to do harm to Joe Walsh. You can abhor the words and beliefs of Charlie Kirk, but say murder is unacceptable. Look, I'm fairly blunt. I believe Donald Trump is a fascist, and I'm going to say that. And to say that does not then mean that, there's a whole clip of things that Trump said about Kamala Harris, calling her a fascist and a communist and everything. That doesn't mean that Donald Trump is responsible for something that some sicko on the left may do. We've got to stop that and all be responsible for our actions. This was a 22-year-old young man in Utah who shot and killed Charlie Kirk. And all I've heard from my former colleagues on the right is they did it. The evildoers did it. They're evil. Paris, who's the they? We got to stop that. One 22-year-old man did this.
And I want to add in that a lot of Republicans have looked at journalists and reporters and pointed fingers at them too,
Yes.
which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense given what we know from this investigation is that officials have said this young man was radicalized by these dark corners of the internet, 4chan and Reddit, maybe not Reddit, but Discord and video games and quoting all these video games. But you know, when the president talks about targeting left-wing NGOs, where do you think that's going to lead?
And people wonder why I call Trump a fascist. I'll tell you where it's going to lead. He's going to use the levers of government to go after the left in this country, to try to silence people on the left. I mean, Paris, my God, my former party, all of a sudden, I remember when J.D. Vance went to Europe like a month after they were sworn in, and J.D. Vance was criticizing Europe on how they can't handle free speech. And there was J.D. Vance today saying that the government is going to, that people should call out people who criticize Charlie Kirk, and they should contact people's employers if people were critical of Charlie Kirk. We've got Marco Rubio saying they may rescind the visas of people in this country who might post things critical of Charlie Kirk. Oh my God. I mean, what the government is going to tell us what we can and cannot say. This is scary stuff. And it's unfortunate, Paris, because again, the country should come together. You know, Joe, but we have somebody in the White House who's humanly incapable of that.
And you mentioned the fact that, you know, people should be able to abhor what you say, but be peaceful. And looking at some of the responses to some of your social media posts, there's plenty of people out there, I think, that abhor what you say. But do you feel scared for your own safety, given the climate now that folks just openly throw around this word civil war?
Paris, every time I speak in public, I worry about my safety. Every time public figures like me who go out in public and speak and are fairly outspoken, you have to have security now. This is the world we live in. You worry about who's in the crowd now. This is the world we live in. Charlie was outspoken. I love that about him, even if I disagreed with what he said. I am outspoken. If you choose to be outspoken right now, you are going to put up with threats on a regular basis. And as a former member of Congress, we need to think about how we provide more security to our members of Congress, because I'm hearing, Paris, many of them are very reticent to have open to the public town halls right now. And they need to do that. So we've got to talk about their security.
That's certainly a very chilling prospect. And one of the great things about Washington, D.C. and the Capitol is how accessible everybody is and how tourists can just walk among their elected officials. Joe Walsh, great to talk to you. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
Thanks, Paris.
All right, you got it. And after the break, a new poll shedding light on the political leanings of Chicago's Latino population. Stay with us.